What's up, creatives? I was working on a new blog post where I'm basically using the Penpot design platform. It's like an open source version of like Figma. And I'm basically using their MCP server, which basically allows me to connect an LLM to Penpot, write some stuff like make a button, and it makes a button on my actual design canvas. So I thought I'd walk a little bit through the process of that whole thing and seeing just how some of it works. And yeah, just like doing a little quick video of that kind of stuff. Keep an eye out for the blog post. Should be up pretty soon. Let's get into it. If you don't know what MCP is, it's basically Model Context Protocol. So it's a way for LLMs to basically have an API to access different things. So when I'm asking an LLM, basically an AI chatbot, hey, tell me the weather, it needs to access that some particular way. So it does it using MCP. And the MCP in this particular case is a Penpot server that they've custom kind of written, and it exposes a couple of different tools that the LLM can use, and it allows it to access, like I said, the Penpot file. So what do we need to do this? You need Penpot. So the first thing that I have set up is Penpot here. You can see this running on a local host 9000 port here. If I go to my Docker, you can see that I basically have the Penpot Docker image just running just in Docker. If you want to get this set up, you basically, I believe I cloned the Penpot repo, and they have a Docker setup available there. But yeah, it's pretty simple. It's like use the image, run it. But once you got Penpot set up, that's kind of like the baseline. Then you're going to want the actual MCP server. So you're going to actually want to go over to the Penpot repo on GitHub, and they have a MCP folder inside of their repo. And that's where the server is held, as well as the plugin code that we'll talk about in a minute. And this basically, like I mentioned earlier, this is just a server that you'll run on your computer, and it'll allow you to basically talk from the LLM to the plugin to your Penpot. Kind of see the architecture here. What you do is you clone the Penpot repo, which I've done myself, and then you can open it up on your PC, IDE, ideally. Basically did the install process and the run process. You can see all the instructions basically on the GitHub README. Once you've installed everything and you have the server running using, you can see it here, yeah, pnpm run bootstrap, it'll basically go through, build the server, run it, and once the server is running, you can see all the information here and kind of the logs. We can see that we have a local connection here. This is the actual plugin server. So if I clicked this, you can see that this is our plugin. And if I do the manifest.json, you can see that this is a Penpot plugin manifest that we have to serve. If you're familiar with like Figma plugins, this is basically like the Figma manifest. But with Penpot, you actually have to serve it over a server. It's really weird. Basically, that gets served over like one server port. And then if you actually scroll down a little bit, you can actually see that we have a MCP server that gets exposed as well. So it actually gets exposed on port 4401. Once you have this set up, and this is running in the background, you can basically go now and set up the plugin. Like I said, the plugin is already exposed using this. So you go, you open up like any file, and you install the plugin, and you enter in that manifest URL, and that'll install it. I already have it installed, so we can basically just click this, and it opens it up here. But I'll actually go back, and once the plugin's open, you'll see a connect to MCP server here. You just click that, and if it works, if your MCP server is running, you'll see that you're connected. Cool, we're good to go, right? So now we have Penpot running, we have an MCP server running, we have an MCP plugin running, we have the MCP plugin installed and connected to the MCP server. Whew. Let's check out the actual LLM, because we actually haven't actually talked about that at all. The way that the LLM works is you have to pick a LLM like app. You could use Olama, you can use all these different providers to get your models, but ultimately you're going to want something you can chat inside of and establish an MCP connection. So you can use something like Open Web UI, anything LLM, I think, if like you wanted like more open source kind of options. But since I'm running on Windows, LM Studio is kind of like one of the best kind of desktop kind of applications for interacting with the LLM. But I installed the OpenAI GPT OSS 20 billion request or whatever model. And this is kind of like a baseline model that a lot of people use for just anything, just like chatting, whatever. And you can also use it for this design stuff as well. Works pretty well. We can switch to that model. It switches. And basically we have to go, I think, in here. And we basically have to expose our LLM as an API. So once the server is exposed, we can do things like also connect MCP stuff. So here you can see that I have Docker set up as well with like my Docker stuff. But Penpot is set up basically just by putting in a URL and the MCP server. And that's it. Boom, Penpot connected. So once it knows where the MCP server is for Penpot, if we come back over here, we can see that Penpot is exposed inside of our integrations tab. And here you can see the list of tools that I was talking about earlier, like executing the code inside of your document to be able to like do the changes and stuff. So cool. Basically, I guess to give you like a high level overview of how this works, these are tools that the LLM will use when you ask it to do things. So if I say like, go to this like page, it's gonna like have to go and say, what is that page? How do I even access a page? What is like the code to access a page? Because I'm using a JavaScript based API. So it has like a few steps that it needs to take to kind of like understand how to tackle the situation. So kind of to give it the information that we need. When it first does its like loading, we have a system prompt that basically tells it, run the high level overview tool. And the high level overview tool basically just provides like a giant markdown file that's like instructions on how to use Penpot. And it teaches it everything, where it's like a rectangle is a shape and a shape has color and color has this, you know, and it teaches it just basically like all those weird specifications that you need to know about the design app that a human being may like make assumptions about or something. And it also gives it code examples. So it'll be like, you know, when you need to find a component, here's code examples on how to find that component. If you're interested in seeing those instructions, you can see them inside of the MCP server repo database, or repo rather, code base, all that good stuff. So it uses the high-level overview tool to just understand the app, and then when it needs more granular information, it can get access to it using the API information. These are both great like ways to like have a LLM just have access to information without overloading the context with just all the information up front. So you're ensuring that the LLM only gets access to what it needs at the time, and you keep your context really like small and light, because as we'll see, the context gets filled up very quickly, and that will cause hallucinations or failures. But let's get to the magic, right? I've been talking a lot, but let's actually do some stuff. So let's create a new chat here. Let's actually do some configurations here. Normally the default context is about 4,000. So we need way more than that. Just the instructions themselves that we provide in the high-level overview are like 6,000 tokens or something like that. So we're going to want a minimum of like 10,000 tokens. But I prefer something around like 30,000 personally, so that it gives us access to maybe doing a few different commands at once. And that should give us just a larger context size. So as we're chatting, things just don't get filled up and it just doesn't just start failing immediately. There were a lot of those cases where it would just conk out. But we were here in our file. Let's say that I wanted to, like, I don't know, inspect some particular elements, right? That's a good starting place. So let's go over to the Assets tab. Let's come into here. Let's select this component. So this is a dark library color default component. And then let's ask the LLM just to tell us what we have selected. It goes over the high-level overview, which basically gives it that huge chunk of text. And then you can see here it runs an execute code tool that I mentioned. And literally that, if we inspect it, it basically just returns our Penpot selection. Like this is all just JavaScript code that uses the Penpot JavaScript SDK. So you can see that I have one component selected and it selected the correct one and it knows what I have selected. So let's open a new chat. Cool. And let's do something else. Let's say, or let's add a rectangle. Let's start simple. Let's go to like another page. Let's open like a brand new page, right? Test page. We'll call it test page. And we'll say on the current page, I want you to make a rectangle, a teal rectangle. Let's make it like a colored rectangle. At 0, 0, 420 pixels natch and 200 pixels high. And I think that's it. We can see that it's starting to like fail some of the tool calls. Has to think a little bit, has to like learn about the APIs, probably asking it what is a rectangle. Yeah, what is a shape? And then the API returns information about the shape. And then after getting all of that information, it finally had the kind of data that it needed to form the correct code and access the correct APIs. And then it ran the code. And I'm assuming, and we can see here, that it ran the same code twice. So you can see here that it tried to set the width and the height using basically kind of like properties on the rectangle, but it actually had to use a resize method instead, and that's actually what worked. So little things like that. But yeah, boom. We have a rectangle on the page. I don't know why we have two rectangles. Do you see that? So when it failed to do the first rectangle, it made the rectangle. And then it made the second one, and it didn't clean up its mess. Okay, all right. So you can already see some of the problems leaking through. So let's ask it to do something simple, right? Make a button. All right. So let's talk about like buttons real quick. So in Penpot, we have components like we do have in Sketch and Figma in these applications, and they're called components, just like that. And they're referred to as assets, and they're stored inside of the assets kind of tab here. And basically, if we wanted to use a button inside of the pencil design system, you can see here that they organize their buttons by dart, and then button, and then primary, and then icon plus text, or just icon or text buttons, which all makes sense. So I'm not knocking this. And then we actually have basically each state for our button. So you can see the kind of like structure that our components are like kind of organized in and stored. So when I say a button, you know, the word button actually is very high up in this like tree here. You know, when I'm actually getting down to it, I'm asking for an icon plus text default. You know, like it gets a little difficult here. So when you're actually asking for components, we have to say something like, we'll say inside the current page. Let's see if it can know what the current page is. Cool. And now we have a disabled component. And you can see that it is the button that's disabled, but it's not the primary one. Man, gotta really be specific, right? Okay. Let's try one more time. And primary. Let's try that one more time. Let's see if we got the right button. Nice. We got it. I don't know if it's correct. I'd get into it more, but as you can see, it's very flaky. I just did like the same thing like 3 times, and it failed twice. 4 times, I'm sorry. Failed twice. Kind of worked 1 time, and then finally did what I asked it to the 4th time. So it had a 25% success rate. You know, that's rough. There's potential in this. I'll talk about it in my article. After using this for a little bit, you can see that it takes a lot of hand-holding, and it takes a lot of work to like get it working to the place that you kind of want it to. If you go to the Penpot YouTube channel, they have a playlist where they kind of like give examples of all the different things that you can do with it, which is a great way to get some inspiration if you want to see like what people do. Like you can see here, they do crazy stuff where they're like, let's take this design and make it code or whatever, and they make it HTML. Or it was the one where they actually scribble. And this really exemplifies like why you would want to use an LLM for this kind of thing. Let me draw an image, have the LLM read the image, understand the image itself, and then utilize existing components inside of my app to kind of like plug that in. That's kind of cool if it works well and consistently. This is the kind of stuff I would use this for. If I wanted to do like heavily programmatic things to a design system where I'm like massively editing things and altering styles, I would honestly depend on a plugin that I wrote myself that has more accurate code that I can like test and validate, rather than utilizing the LLM, which is basically like gambling every time and wondering if I'm going to get the right response or not, or wondering if it messed up something along the process. But yeah, like I said, enjoy. Hope this was a nice little preview into Penpot and their MCP. See you guys next time. Stay creative.